On her wedding day, Emily Carter realized something was wrong. Not because of the flowers or the music or the perfectly arranged guests sitting in quiet anticipation. Everything looked flawless. Too flawless. It was the way Ethan Blake looked at her. Not with love, not even with nervous excitement, but with something colder, controlled, like a man finishing a deal, not starting a life. Emily stood at the end of the aisle, her hands trembling slightly around the bouquet. She told herself it was normal. Weddings were overwhelming. Anyone would feel this way. But then she heard it, a whisper from behind her. He doesn't love you. Her breath caught. She turned slightly, but the guests were already facing forward, pretending nothing had been said. The voice had come and gone like a shadow. And he never did. The words sank deeper this time. Heavy, unavoidable. Emily's eyes slowly lifted toward Ethan again. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. For a moment, the entire world around her seemed to blur. The music faded. The priest's voice became distant. All she could hear was her own heartbeat. Loud, uneven, warning her. Still, she walked forward. Because what else could she do? 3 months earlier, her life had been simple. Not easy, but simple. Emily worked 2 jobs, barely sleeping, barely eating properly, trying to keep up with hospital bills that never seemed to end. Her father lay in a private room she couldn't afford, machines breathing for him when his own body struggled too. Every day, she told herself she just needed a little more time, a little more money, a little more hope. Then Ethan Blake walked in her life. Not gradually, not naturally. Suddenly, he entered the small cafe where she worked like he didn't belong there, his presence too sharp for the quiet space. He didn't sit, didn't order. He just looked at her. Emily Carter, he said. Her name sounded unfamiliar in his voice. She frowned slightly. Do I know you? No, he replied calmly. But I know you. There was no arrogance in his tone, just certainty. That should have been her first warning. I want to marry you. The words landed without context, without build-up. Emily blinked, convinced she had misheard him. I'm sorry. Ethan didn't repeat himself right away. He studied her instead, as if measuring her reaction, calculating something behind those unreadable eyes. I'll cover all your father's medical expenses, he added. That's when everything shifted, not emotionally, but practically, because reality doesn't wait for feelings. Her father needed treatment, immediate treatment, and she had already run out of options. You're serious? She asked quietly. Completely. There was no warmth in the offer, no romance, just terms, like a contract. Emily should have walked away. Anyone else would have. But desperation has a way of rewriting logic. What's the catch? She asked. Ethan's lips curved slightly. There always is one. He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough so only she could hear. You don't ask questions. The silence that followed stretched longer than it should have. Emily's mind raced through every possible outcome, every risk, every unknown consequence. But all of them led back to the same place. Her father, still in that hospital bed, still waiting. Okay, she said. The word felt heavier than anything she had ever said before. And just like that, her life was no longer her own. The wedding came faster than she expected. Arranged, organized, controlled. Every detail handled by people she didn't know, for a future she didn't understand. Ethan barely spoke to her during those weeks. Only when necessary. Only about logistics. He never asked how she felt. Never asked if she was scared. And she never asked why. Because she already knew the answer didn't matter. What she didn't know was that this marriage had nothing to do with her. Not really. It was about her family, a past she didn't even fully understand, and a revenge she had never seen coming. Back in the present, standing at the altar, Emily felt the weight of that truth pressing against her chest. Even if she didn't have proof yet, even if it was just a feeling. Something wasn't right. And deep down, she already knew. This wasn't the beginning of a love story. It was the start of something far more dangerous. It was the start of something far more dangerous. The ceremony continued as if nothing had changed. The priest spoke. The guests watched. Cameras flashed. And Emily stood there, repeating vows she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. "I do," she said. Her voice didn't shake. That surprised her more than anything. Ethan's gaze remained fixed on her, unreadable as ever. "I do," he replied. No hesitation, no emotion, just certainty. The rings were exchanged. Applause followed. And just like that, they were married. The reception was a blur of polite smiles and quiet observations. Emily noticed how people spoke to Ethan. Carefully, respectfully, like he was someone you didn't question. But when they looked at her, there was curiosity, confusion, even pity. That feeling returned. The one she couldn't name yet. That night, the house was too quiet, too large, too unfamiliar. Emily stood in the center of the bedroom, still in her wedding dress, unsure what to do next. The door opened behind her. Ethan walked in. He didn't look at her right away. Instead, he loosened his tie, placing it neatly on the chair. "You can use the left side of the closet," he said. Emily turned slowly. That's it. He finally met her eyes. "What were you expecting?" The question wasn't cruel. It was honest. And somehow, that made it worse. Emily looked down at her hands. "I don't know," she admitted. Ethan nodded once, as if that confirmed something for him. "Good," he said, because neither did he. Days turned into weeks, and the marriage settled into something structured, predictable, cold. They lived in the same house, ate at the same table, slept in the same room, but there was always distance. Invisible, constant. Emily tried at first. She cooked meals, asked about his day, tried to understand him, but Ethan never gave her anything to hold on to. His answers were short, his presence distant, and slowly, she stopped trying. The first crack appeared on a quiet evening. Emily had gone looking for a file in his office. She hadn't meant to stay, hadn't meant to listen, but then she heard his voice. Sharp, different. "It's already in motion." She froze. Another voice answered, "And she suspects nothing." Ethan paused. "No." The word echoed louder than it should have. Emily's fingers tightened around the doorframe. "What about her family?" the voice continued. "That's the point," Ethan replied. Cold. Final. "They'll pay for what they did." Something inside Emily shifted. Not confusion, not fear. Understanding. Slow. Painful. Clear. She stepped back quietly, careful not to make a sound. Her heart was racing now, but her mind, strangely calm, because the truth had finally found her. This marriage wasn't real. It never had been, and she was never meant to be loved. She didn't confront him that night, or the next. Instead, she watched, listened, paid attention, the way he spoke on calls, the names he avoided, the tension that appeared whenever her family was mentioned. And piece by piece, the story came together. But something didn't fit. Not completely, because the version of her family he seemed to hate didn't match the one she knew. And that doubt was enough. Enough to stop her from breaking. Enough to make her think. And thinking changed everything. Changed everything. Emily stopped reacting. That was the first thing Ethan noticed. No more questions. No more quiet attempts to connect. Just silence. But not the same kind of silence as before. This one had weight. Intention. Awareness. She still sat across from him at dinner. Still moved through the house like she belonged there. But something about her had shifted. Something he couldn't quite define. And that made him watch her more closely. Late one evening, Emily sat alone in the study. A file lay open in front of her. Not just any file. One of his. She had found it by accident. Or at least, that's what she would say if anyone asked. Inside were documents. Old reports, legal notices, and one name, repeated again and again. Her father's. But the dates didn't match. The accusations didn't align. And the signatures were inconsistent. Emily's fingers tightened around the page. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered. And for the first time, she realized something important. Ethan wasn't just wrong. He had been lied to. The door behind her opened. She didn't turn around. "I was wondering where you were," Ethan said. His voice was calm. Too calm. Emily closed the file slowly. "Working," she replied. A pause. "You shouldn't be in here." She nodded. "I know," but she didn't apologize. That was new. Ethan stepped closer. "What did you see?" Emily turned then. Her expression was calm, almost unreadable. "Enough," she said. The word lingered between them. Ethan studied her carefully now, as if seeing her for the first time. Something about her was no longer predictable. "Stay out of my office," he said finally. Emily held his gaze. "Then stop hiding things in it." Silence. Heavy. Unfamiliar. She walked past him without another word. And for the first time, he didn't stop her. Days passed. Then weeks. Emily began to change. Subtly, but undeniably. She dressed differently, spoke less, observed more. And behind that quiet transformation, she was building something. A plan. Meanwhile, Ethan started noticing the absence. Not her presence. Her absence. She no longer waited for him at dinner. No longer asked where he was going. No longer looked at him like he mattered. And strangely, that unsettled him more than anything else. One night, he found her on the balcony, looking out over the city, just like he often did. "When did you start coming out here?" he asked. Emily didn't turn. "When I realized you weren't the only one who needed space." A simple answer, but it hit harder than expected. Ethan stepped beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt different now. Not empty, but shifting. "Why did you marry me?" Emily asked suddenly. No emotion, just curiosity. Ethan didn't answer right away, because for the first time, the truth didn't feel as simple as it used to. "You already know," he said finally. Emily nodded slightly. "Yes," she said. "I just wanted to hear you say it." He looked at her then, really looked, and what he saw wasn't the same woman he had married. "Revenge," he said. The word landed between them. Cold. Final. Emily closed her eyes briefly. Not in pain, but in confirmation. "Thank you," she said softly. Ethan frowned. That wasn't the reaction he expected. "For what?" Emily opened her eyes. And this time, there was something new in them. Clarity. "For being honest," she said. And then, she walked away, leaving him standing there, with something unfamiliar settling in his chest. Not guilt, not regret, but something close. Something he wasn't ready to name yet. Something he wasn't ready to name yet. The next few days felt different, not because anything had changed on the surface, but because everything underneath had. Emily stopped hiding what she was doing. She started making calls. Quiet ones. Careful ones. Names Ethan didn't recognize. Places he hadn't expected her to know. And slowly, a new pattern began to form. One that didn't revolve around him. That unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. One evening, he returned home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, but not empty. Voices echoed faintly from the study. Emily's voice, and someone else's. He paused at the door, not to listen, but because something told him he should. "The signatures were forged," Emily was saying. His chest tightened. "There's no record of my father approving those transactions," she continued. A man's voice responded. Then someone wanted it to look like he did. Silence. Then, Emily spoke again, and Ethan believed it. Not angry, not bitter, just factual, like she had already accepted it. Ethan pushed the door open. Both of them turned. The man sitting across from Emily stood immediately. "Mr. Blake," he said, uneasy. Ethan ignored him. His eyes were locked on Emily. "What is this?" he asked. Emily didn't flinch. "Truth," she replied. The word hit harder than it should have. Ethan stepped closer. "What are you talking about?" Emily slid the file across the table. "Read it." He didn't want to. That was the first sign. But he did anyway. Page after page. Numbers, dates, signatures, and inconsistencies he had never noticed before. Or maybe never wanted to. "This isn't possible," he said. But his voice lacked conviction. Emily watched him quietly. "It is," she said. "And you know it." Silence filled the room. Heavy, unavoidable. The man cleared his throat. "We found evidence of internal manipulation," he said carefully. "Someone inside your company altered the records years ago." Ethan's grip on the file tightened. "Who?" The man hesitated. Emily answered instead. "Daniel." The name landed like a blow. Ethan's expression didn't change, but something behind it cracked. "That's not possible," he said. But this time, he sounded unsure. Emily stood slowly. "I thought so too," she said. "But I kept looking, because unlike you." She paused, her voice soft, but sharp. "I needed the truth." Ethan said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. The room felt smaller now, the air heavier, and for the first time, the past he had built his life around didn't feel solid anymore. It felt fragile, constructed, a lie. Emily picked up her coat. "I'm done," she said. Ethan looked up sharply. "Done with what?" She met his eyes. "With this marriage." The words were calm, decisive, final. "You don't mean that," he said. But now, there was something in his voice. Something new. Fear. Emily shook her head slightly. "I do." She stepped past him. But this time, he reached for her, his fingers closing around her wrist. "Emily." She stopped, not because of his grip, but because of his voice. It wasn't controlled anymore. It wasn't cold. It was breaking. "You can't just leave," he said. Emily turned slowly, her expression steady. "Watch me." She pulled her hand free and walked out, leaving him standing there, with the truth, with the consequences, and with something he had never expected to feel. Loss. Real. Irreplaceable. And far too late. And far too late. The house felt different after she left. Not quieter, but emptier, like something essential had been removed. Ethan stood in the middle of the living room, the silence pressing in from all sides. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to do. The file still sat open on the table, the truth staring back at him. Daniel. The name echoed louder now. Every memory, every conversation, every decision suddenly felt different, rewritten, manipulated. Ethan clenched his jaw, not in anger, not yet, but in realization. He had built his entire life on a lie, and worse, he had destroyed someone innocent because of it. Emily. Her name felt heavier now, different. He walked into the bedroom. Her side was empty, clean, gone. No trace of hesitation. No sign she planned to return. That hit harder than anything else. She hadn't left in anger. She had left in certainty. And that meant she was truly done. Ethan sat down slowly, his hands resting on his knees. Still, for a long time, he didn't move, didn't think, didn't breathe properly, until finally, something broke. Not loudly, not violently, but quietly, like a realization settling too deep to ignore. He stood abruptly, grabbed his phone, dialed her number. Once, twice. Voicemail. "Emily," he said, his voice tight. He stopped, because he didn't know what to say. Apologies felt too small, and explanations too late. He hung up, and for the first time, he understood. This wasn't something he could fix. Not with words, not with power, not even with truth. Meanwhile, Emily stepped out of the taxi, the city stretching wide in front of her. A small apartment building stood ahead. Nothing like the house she had just left. but it felt real. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, set her bag down, and exhaled. For the first time in months, she could breathe. No expectations, no lies, no pretending, just silence. But this time, it felt peaceful. Days passed, then weeks. Emily rebuilt slowly, carefully, on her own terms. She found work, stability, and something she hadn't felt in a long time: control. Meanwhile, Ethan unraveled quietly, not publicly, not dramatically, but internally. He cut ties with Daniel, exposed the truth, reversed what damage he could, but none of it changed the one thing that mattered. Emily was gone, and this time, there was no getting her back. One evening, months later, their paths crossed again. Not planned, not expected, just chance. Emily stood across the street, talking to someone, smiling, a real smile, the kind he had never seen from her before. Ethan froze. For a moment, he almost called out to her, almost crossed the distance, almost tried again. But then, he stopped, because he understood something now. She wasn't his to reach anymore, not his to fix, not his to lose again. She had already walked away, and she hadn't looked back. Emily turned slightly. Their eyes met. For a brief second, time paused. No anger, no hatred, just distance, a quiet understanding. She gave a small nod, polite, final. Then she turned away and kept walking. Ethan didn't follow, didn't call her name, didn't move, because this time he understood what losing her really meant. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, permanent, and entirely his fault. He married her for revenge. But by the time he learned the truth, by the time he learned how to love her, she was already gone. And this time, there was no second chance.